being recorded.
There we go. Before we begin the presentation, I would like to share a few housekeeping tips and reminders. Today's webinar will be recorded. You will be able to access the recording on Syracuse University's YouTube page and via the Career Services website. Today we are using the audio conference phone session in order to hear our presenter, and I would ask that all of the participants please mute their phones so that we're not talking over each other. Guy did say that if you have a question, he'd be more than willing to address it during the presentation, and you can type in the chat box that you have a question, and he will ask that you unmute your phone and we can have the conversation. Otherwise, you are able to type your questions into the chat area on the bottom right screen, and you can also follow along on Twitter with CareersSU with the hashtag SUAlumWS for webinar series. If you do experience technical difficulties, please go to the Help button at the top right corner or on your personal computer or the bottom left on the app. And you can also call the Adobe Connect support team at 1-800-422-3623. We do appreciate your feedback about the webinar series. Being a new series, we are learning and growing with each presentation. I will distribute a survey at the end of the presentation, and you can also contact me directly with any comments or feedback that you might have, or if you are interested in hosting a webinar in the future. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our presenter, Guy Waltman. Guy graduated from Syracuse University in 2014 with a degree in biology. He has turned his passion for facilitating healthier future generations into a successful health and fitness business. Family First Fitness Incorporated, otherwise known as F3, was founded in June of 2013 by Guy, a then senior at Syracuse University, who has since made a lifelong commitment to facilitating health and wellness around the world. Guy draws from the tragic death of his father as motivation, having passed away from metabolic disease 1 year prior. Guy is a certified personal trainer, weight loss specialist, group fitness instructor, youth fitness specialist, nutrition expert, and professional public speaker for the NFL's Fuel Up to Play 60. Guy has developed F3 to focus on family, education, and fitness, the three priorities that Guy believes are essential to holistic health and wellness. The purpose of this webinar is to discuss tactics for improving the health of our nation and world through a family commitment to fitness. This seminar will cover the three central components of holistic health and wellness: the physical, the psychological, and the nutritional, with a keen focus on nutrition. Specifically, Guy will walk us through the nuances of calories and nutrients, unlock the keys of weight management, and discuss various governmental policies that surround nutrition, namely in the realm of marketing and advertising. Guy, the floor is yours.
Well, that sounds so exciting. So if everyone's microphones or cell phones, whatever you're calling in on, are in fact muted, I do just want to reemphasize, we have an hour put aside for this year. However, in doing a couple of dry runs, we do have some time for questions that I want people to feel free to jump in and ask. So if at any point during the presentation you do feel that you want to ask a question, go ahead and type it into the chat box that you should see in the bottom right-hand corner, and then I will see your question there, and I will tell you to unmute your phone, and then we can kind of talk about it. Otherwise, having your cell phone muted would be the most helpful thing. So now, without further ado here, and I see some people joining in, hopefully they kind of get the hint as we move along. Holistic health and nutrition. So starting with a little bit of a story, and I see that my sister has just joined the participant list, so I'm sure she'll appreciate this just as much. It was my freshman year at SU up on the Hill, and I was taking, as a biology major, I was taking chemistry. And class was from, I remember this so clearly, class was from 12:30 until 1:50 p.m. And I was right in the Arts and Sciences building there. And after every class on Thursday, our class on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and after those Thursday classes, I would walk out of the building to find a white minivan waiting for me, my sister in the front seat of the car. I would hop in, and her and I would go home. And we did this for the entire year, every single week of that year, my freshman year and my sister's junior year at Lemoyne College. We drove home. And the reason why we did that is because not long prior, our father, was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. And the doctors had told him that he had 6 weeks to live. Now, as my mother is calling me, I hope you guys don't hear that beeping. So anyway, we would go home and spend time with him as best that we could because we knew that we didn't have much time left. And my father ended up passing away later that summer, several months later, not weeks, but months later, from ultimately what is called metabolic disease. Okay. Now, metabolic disease is more of an umbrella term that encompasses many things, cancer being one of them. And a lot of people don't actually realize that the leading cause of cancer in the world is metabolic disease and obesity. But my father suffered from different symptoms, including type 2 diabetes. He had 2 heart attacks throughout his life, clearly the obesity, and ultimately brain cancer that took his life years later. And he is the driving force for everything that I do. He is the inspiration, the source of inspiration that I have to want to improve the health and wellness of our nation and of our world. And it is my belief, having my father being my source of motivation, it is my belief that this will only be accomplished through a family commitment to fitness, starting in the home and with entire families. Now, it was on my 16th birthday that my father told me that I needed to create a code to live by. And again, I'm hearing a little bit of feedback here. So for those late bloomers here who joined the conference call a little late, we did ask that you guys humbly mute your cell phones or whatever device that you're on, as to not have any feedback. So if you can mute your phones, that'd be helpful. But it was on my 16th birthday that my father told me that I needed to create a code to live by. And I asked him, sort of what he meant. He said, so your code is the way in which you will live your life, knowing that if you live it that way, you will be proud of it. So I sort of looked at him and I was like, well, that's pretty vague, help me out here. I need something to get started. And I asked him what his code was and if he had one. And he said, of course I have one. And he wouldn't tell me, though, because he said that it will influence, the creation of my own. And but he said it could be anything. It could be a single word. It could be a sentence. It could be a poem. It could be anything. And so I spent quite a substantial amount of time on it, thinking about it. And ultimately what I did was I assessed what I believed to be the priorities of my life. And at the time, as a 16-year-old young man in high school, I came up with family being the most important thing in my life at the time, and still is, of course. School, I was always told by my parents, teachers, coaches that my job at the time and at that age, my job was to be a student, to compete in the classroom, to pull the best grades that I could, and to learn everything that I could every single day. And then after that, and not until after those two things, after being a good son to my parents, after being a good brother to my sister, after being the best student that I could be, came my sports. So I ran to my dad one day and I said, I got it. And he looks at me, he goes, all right, let's hear it. So I said, family, school, and sports. And I was so thrilled, because I was so proud of it. But I was confused when he looked at me and he said that that's really good for now. And I said, for now? What do you mean for now? I was really proud of it. I really put a lot of time and thought into it. And it wasn't until years later, once I stopped playing organized sports, I played lacrosse for SU. It wasn't until years later when my enrollment in formal education, formal schooling, I should say, came to an end. It wasn't until I was standing on the turf of the Carrier Dome on the day of my graduation that it hit me like an absolute freight train what my father meant those years ago as a 16-year-old young man when he said that it's really good for now. I realized that my code was outdated. And that being said, in reevaluating my code, family is still first, and it will always be first. Family is what you make it, but family is first. Education, because there's always something to learn. And lastly, fitness. Yes, people say that without health, you have nothing. Health is a foundation that things grow upon. But I also believe that to be fit is to be alive. Just because you are living does not mean that you are alive, in my opinion. Well, we have some ringing going on. I don't know if people can hear that. Just going to let that wait out. Jen, are you there? Okay, let's just keep going here. So, again, my experience with my father taught me that just because you are alive, just because your heart is beating, and just because you are breathing, by absolutely no means are you alive just because you are living. To be fit and to be youthful is to be alive, and that is why this holistic health and nutrition webinar that we're going through is something that I am so passionate about. So when we talk about holistic health, and if I asked you to think about what health meant to you, a lot of people think of the physical, the exercise. If I say to people, it doesn't matter how old they are, they could be as little as second grade. What do you think of when you think of health? The first thing that people usually think of is exercise. And beyond that, the more sophisticated mind will usually think of the nutritional component. Okay, so sort of what you do with your body and what you put in your body are the two things that people usually think of when they think of health. But not many people remember or understand the importance of the psychological component as well. And it is these three things, these three aspects that ultimately make up the triad of holistic health. Now, the key is to remember that these three things are all connected, each domain transcending into the other two, okay? And we will, of course, touch upon that more as we go along. But the goal of leading a healthy lifestyle, the goal is to ultimately give your body as much energy as you possibly can every single day of living. To reiterate, to give your body as much energy as you can every single day of your life. And this can be done, as we see here in this triad, in three ways. The first, we'll just touch briefly on the physical. Again, this is namely a nutrition seminar, but we will touch upon both of those other angles as well. And I'm seeing some questions pop up. Yes, Angel, you should have sound. And then, unfortunately, yeah. So, Angel, if you can hear me when you join the conference, you should be prompted to type in your cell phone number, and then it will call you in. Hopefully you can figure that out. So the first of which is the physical. Again, the goal is to give your body, to give yourself as much energy as possible. We can do that in three ways. We can do that psychologically, physically, and nutritionally. We're talking about physical right now. I always say that physical activity needs to be as routine as brushing your teeth. Okay, it's something that you do every single day, no matter what. Now, that does not mean that every day needs to be a marathon, nor does that mean that every day needs to be a sprint. But every day does need to be something, okay? And what you want to do is you want to keep it fun, and you want to change it up. You want to keep it fresh, and you want to make sure that you're challenging your body in new and different ways as much as you can, and again, the whole concept of regular versus varied, regular and varied. Varied meaning keeping it fresh, regular meaning that it, again, is as routine as brushing your teeth. The goal, however, as it pertains to giving your body energy, the goal is to ultimately, what you want to boost, or my sort of coin phrase, you want to jumpstart the metabolism. Now, part of this webinar is talking about the industry as a whole and some of the marketing and advertising that we see within the industry, and this brings us to our first example of this right now. We see all the time a lot of advertisements, whether they be magazines, but for this particular example, I'm going to use, for example, an infomercial. We see things that, without a trained mind, can seem quite enticing. For example, you're watching the infomercial on TV for a product or for products that I will refrain from mentioning, and you hear the guy, right, the infomercial voice, and he's got that deep voice, and you hear him say, he goes, these workouts have been proven to burn upwards of 1,000 calories in 1 hour. And you're home, right, and you're on your couch, and you hear that, and you're like, wow, like 1,000 calories, that's got to be great, right? Like 1,000 calories, that's got to be a lot. Well, what a lot of people don't necessarily understand is that, for example, 1 pound is equal to 3,500 calories. Imagine that same infomercial voice saying, these workouts are proven to burn just shy of 1/3 of 1 pound in an entire hour. You would hear that's the same exact message being delivered, but you would hear a much different thing. It's far less enticing and far less compelling to want to pick up the phone and buy that product. The reality is that it takes as little, and studies have shown that it takes as little as 4 to 10 minutes of exercise to boost your metabolism. So the Family First Fitness approach keeps that in mind, but ultimately what I would implore you all to do, again, is in keeping in mind that physical activity needs to be as routine as brushing your teeth, you want to have a minimum of 4 and preferably 10 minutes of physical activity every day. Now, moving on to the psychological component. Moving quickly, but still, we don't want to undervalue this point. We live in an age of melancholy. And what I mean by that is that there's so many millions of people who are living unfulfilled lives. Okay? And I see a note from Jen here. She's politely reminding people to please mute your phones. There's a lot of feedback coming through, so please mute your phones. If you do have a question, you can unmute your phone and then ask it, but for the presentation, please mute your phone. So we live in this age of melancholy where there's so many millions of people who are living unfulfilled lives, and that is why part of what my goal is through this entrepreneurial endeavor that I'm pursuing, it's to increase human flourishing, and that is a quote that I taken from Dr. Rick Evans. He is an expert in positive psychology and someone who I work closely with. The goal is to increase human flourishing ultimately. And there's ways to do that psychologically as well. The reality is that there are many hormones in the body that actually drive behavior. And through the routine and through whatever habits that we choose to exhibit in our day-to-day, we can drive those hormones to, to drive positive behaviors, or we can manipulate those hormones to drive negative behaviors. And so many people fall victim to these vicious cycles. You hear that phrase all the time, these vicious cycles where you have physiological symptoms that lead to, they have a psychological effect. Okay, the physical affects the psychological. Remember, the TRIAD, each component transcending one another. The physical transcending into the psychological, resulting in depression, right? The depression making it difficult to eat healthy. If you're depressed, if you are lethargic, you don't have the energy to do meal prep, to cook healthy meals. You're going to buy what's quick and on the go. That compounds the physical in the sense that now you're not going to have the energy to exercise, and it leads to more physiological and physical implications, and you have this vicious cycle. So, again, my next quick little plug is that for these reasons, the Family First Fitness approach is that we, of course, take the psychological journey very seriously, and it is a quintessential component of the program as well. So, but here we are, to the main point of this webinar, the nutritional component. This is, of course, the main way to give your body energy. And I want to touch upon the difference between calories and nutrients. Okay, I don't mean to read word for word here from the slide, but these are not synonymous terms. Calories and nutrients, they should not and cannot be used interchangeably. Who has heard of the word empty calorie? Yes, rhetorical question. But an empty calorie, what it means to be empty, what it is lacking, is nutrients. That is why calories and nutrients cannot be used synonymously, because an empty calorie is one that lacks nutrient value. All right? So by definition, we have calories being equal to energy, and then for the purposes of this discussion, we are going to say that nutrients are value. Okay? So therefore, an empty calorie is energy without value. Okay? Energy without value. So, defining value, so you see the word value being highlighted in orange. We have different umbrellas of nutrients. You have what are called the macronutrients and the micro. The macro being what you think of when you think of food, the proteins, the carbs, and the fats, whereas the micro, again, highlighted in orange, the micro is what we're going to use to define value. Value meaning the vitamins and the minerals. In the simplest terms, we're just going to say vitamins and minerals. Right? So in the most simplest form, everything that you put in your body needs to have value. If it doesn't have value, nutritional value, the body cannot use it. So if you consume what are termed empty calories, again to reemphasize, a calorie that lacks nutrients, doesn't have any value in the form of vitamins and minerals, the body can't use it. And then the physiological response that the body takes is it says, okay, well, we can't use it in its current state. Here's what we'll do. Let's go store it later as fat. Okay, so we'll store this energy, we'll store these calories as fat for later usage, and then we'll marry it up with nutrients at that time. And that is a very short example of how you have so much widespread obesity and metabolic disease that we see today, because so many foods that are on the market, the vast majority of foods that are in the market today, they are nutrient deprived and nutrient lacking. They are essentially all empty calories. So, again, everything you put in your body must have vitamin and mineral value. Diving a little bit more into the macronutrients, I want to start with protein, and we will make this quick. The proteins are made up of amino acids, and we wouldn't be going through this if there wasn't a really big kicker here at the end. So try and bear with me. But proteins, they consist of what are called amino acids. There are 20 of them exactly. Okay, 1 through 20 we see here in these blocks. So a protein, it could be amino acid number 1, followed by 9, 9, 18, 17, 15, so on and so forth. It could be 2, 3, 1, 11, 12, 16. The reality is that no matter what the combination of amino acids, it will still be a combination of those same 20. Whether it's 300 amino acids long or whether it's 33,000 amino acids long. It's going to be some combination of that same 1 through 20. And the importance of understanding this is that there's 2 kinds of proteins that relate to the amino acids. There are what are called essential amino acids and non-essential amino acids. Now, this is sort of a confusing term because by absolutely no means does the term non-essential mean that it's not required for life. All 20 amino acids are absolutely 100% required for life. But the term in this context, non-essential. Non-essential means that the body can make it. The body literally has the ability to just produce it within its own structure. Whereas an essential amino acid is one that the body cannot produce. The body does not have the ability to manufacture it on its own. Therefore, it must be obtained via nutrition. The kicker here, the reason why we're going through this, is that proteins come in the form of complete and incomplete, not to get too confusing here. A complete protein is therefore a protein that has all of the essential amino acids. An incomplete protein is therefore one that does not contain the essential amino acids. Think about that in terms of the actual foods that you eat. Animal-based and soy proteins are termed complete, meaning that they have all 20 of the essential amino acids, or all 20 amino acids, and therefore all of the essential amino acids that the body needs. Whereas all plant-based protein is what are called incomplete, meaning that they do not have all of the essential amino acids. The takeaway is that if you do engage in a dietary practice that does not include animal-sourced protein, you must have a very, very wide variety of foods in order to satisfy your protein requirement. Because if you don't eat a wide enough variety of foods, as a vegetarian or as a vegan, you will not obtain your amino acid requirement, and you will experience deficiencies, health deficiencies that are related to that protein malnutrient. So, tying back into the advertising, making this very quick. Don't fall for tricky advertising. You see things on the market that say, you know, oh, this protein powder, or oh, this drink or whatever. It has 60 grams of protein. Well, the body can't metabolize more than 30 grams of protein in an hour anyway. So just be cautious. Don't fall for the tricks. Don't buy a drink that brags about the fact that they have 56 grams of protein in it. Don't buy the protein powder that says it has 60 grams per scoop. The body can't even metabolize that much anyway. So, and by no means am I saying that I don't utilize any sort of supplemental protein. I do from time to time. By no means does the body require supplemental protein. You can very easily satisfy your protein requirements through proper nutrition. But don't fall for the tricky advertising. Moving on to fats now. Dietary fat does not make you fat. If you take away like 3 things from this seminar, I want this to be one of them. That dietary fat does not make you fat. Okay? If there was a date that could be assigned to the obesity epidemic, it would be 1977, the McGovern Report. Now, the McGovern Report was an announcement of dietary goals set forth by the United States to hopefully result in more optimal health for its citizens. And the consensus was to take fat, take the fat content out of the foods, because the thought was that fat made you fat, that dietary fat made you fat. Now, couldn't have been more wrong. Could not have been more wrong. Shockingly, through this change, because those changes were made, the food industry listened. They ended up taking the fat out of the foods. It also coincided with this massive spike in physical activity, the Jane Fonda boom, as some may be old enough to remember. The physical activity boom combined with the McGovern Report actually coincided with the greatest exponential increase in metabolic disease and obesity that the world has ever seen. And we will touch upon that momentarily. But finishing up on fats, We have two kinds. There's good and bad. We'll keep it simple. And the goods are the saturated and the unsaturated, where bad is the trans. Now, do not look at your screen right now and say, saturated is good fat? I could have sworn I learned that saturated was bad for you. I will touch upon that in 2 seconds. But first, I want to talk more about the trans fats. Absolutely zero tolerance policy on trans fats. Okay? Trans fats are not found in nature. They are manufactured. They are 100% proven to cause, not increase risk of, cause heart disease, and they ultimately increase your LDL levels. LDL and HDL, they are your cholesterols. LDL standing for low-density lipoprotein, whereas HDL stands for high-density lipoprotein. HDL is your good cholesterol, LDL is your bad cholesterol. And trans fats are proven to cause increased bad cholesterol levels and decreased good cholesterol levels. Zero tolerance policy on trans fats. If you see any food item that has trans fats, put it back on the shelf. And know that because trans fats are not found in nature, know that you are perfectly safe from trans fats if you simply buy foods that are from Earth. Okay? So, the saturated fat myth is that saturated fat is, of course, not bad for you. As many of you, you learned the contrary. I'm telling you the saturated fat is not bad for you at all. There's a difference between correlation and causation. And there were many studies that were done that have since been debunked. Those studies showing a link between saturated fat consumption and increased heart disease, LDL fluctuations, and so on and so forth. Again, the difference between correlation and causation. It was not the saturated fat that was causing those negative health effects. It was the sugar. And once again, I hate to be so just leaving you guys on the hook, but we will talk about the sugar, in a moment. But first, an analogy. What happens when you mix fat, we'll say olive oil and water? Olive oil being fat. We know that they don't mix. Okay, we do this when we are young in school. We see that the olive oil and the water, they separate, and the olive oil sits on top. The reason for this is because fat, the fat molecules themselves, they don't mix with water. Well, apply that analogy to your body. What are you, as a human being, predominantly made out of? What is your bloodstream almost exclusively made out of? Water. So, therefore, absorption of dietary fat is a very complex process that requires breaking down the fat molecules into very small, the word is depolarized parts. You have very special enzymes. And the reality is that the fat molecules, they don't want to mix with your body nor with your bloodstream anyway. And much of the dietary fat that you consume, you actually just dispose of in your waste. So, the final macronutrient to talk about, carbs. This is the big one. There are 3 kinds of carbohydrates. And to reemphasize, this is the moment of the presentation that sort of we've been building up to, the conversation about carbohydrates. This is where metabolic disease comes from. This is where the vast majority of cancer cases in the world come from. This is where the public health crisis that we see today comes from. There's 3 kinds of carbohydrates. There's the good, the bad, and I'm just, for lack of a better term, I say the okay one. In order to find out which one's which, let's look at a food label. Here we see an example. I don't even recall what this particular label was from. I just grabbed it from Google Images. But we see on this label, we go to the carbohydrate section. We see that there's 40 total carbohydrate, 40 grams of total carbohydrate in this particular food product. And we see that 4 of them are from what's called fiber, 18 are from what is called sugar. Where do the remaining 18 grams come from? This is important to note. The good is the fiber. There's 4 grams in that particular food product. Fiber, the function of fiber in your body, fiber is the good one. The function of fiber is to mitigate the negative effects of the bad one, which is sugar. All right? So you can imagine sugar being a spear that's going to go in and hurt you, whereas fiber is the shield that you put up in front of you to protect yourself. Fiber mitigates the negative effects of sugar. Now, on that food product, there's 40 grams of total carbohydrates, 22 grams in the form of fiber and sugar combined. The other remaining come from what are called starches. So, sugar is the enemy, not fat. Remember, dietary fat, it does not make you fat. I'm going to propose to you today that sugar does. Think back to the analogy. What happens when you put olive oil in water? They separate. What happens when you put sugar in water? It dissolves right in. You're left with sugar water. Again, thinking anatomically. What is your body predominantly made of? What is your bloodstream predominantly made of? Water. Therefore, the digestion of fats and sugars are completely different animals. This analogy that we just sort of went through here, it shows us exactly why consumption of sugars leads to weight gain, whereas the ingestion of fats does not. Dietary sugars that you consume will dissolve for all intents and purposes in you, in your bloodstream. Whereas dietary fats, it's a very complicated process, and that same physiological response does not occur. More, though, on the digestion part of it, because I don't want to be so vague. Fiber is not even digestible in the first place. Its function, again, is to mitigate the negative effects of sugar. Starch digests down into sugar. Now, I'm telling you that sugar is the bad one, right? So that doesn't seem good, right, that starch digests into sugar. Quite the contrary, actually. Sugar is 100% required for life. Sugar is actually the most crucial and vital component of nutrition because the brain, your muscles require sugar to function, but your brain exclusively uses energy from sugar. Your brain does not like utilizing energy from anything other than sugar. That's why, however, we want the sugar that our body uses to be from digested starches, not from the direct consumption of sugars themselves, because the digestion of sugars leads to fat storage. All right? So, again, fiber is not digestible. It mitigates the negative effects of sugar, which is a good thing to know. It's a good thing to, therefore, pair your sugar intake with fibrous foods. But to really hammer this point home, we want our body's usage of sugar to be from digested starches. And we want to avoid direct consumption of sugars because they digest directly into fat storage. Ultimately, it is that point that leads us to what keeps me up at night, what wakes me up in the morning, what I have dedicated my life work to, combating the public health crisis that we see today. The issue is not within the industry, or rather the issue is not within the general public, but rather the issue is within the industry. It is not within the consumer, despite the message that is it's constantly being pushed upon all of us, that it's your fault that you're fat, or it's your fault that you have metabolic disease. It's your fault that you have diabetes. It's your fault that you are at risk for heart disease. It's your fault that you have a fatty liver. It's your fault that you can't keep up with your children. It's your fault that you can't keep up with your peers. It's your fault or your parents' fault that you get bullied in school. This is ultimately the biggest lie that you and your children will ever be told in your lives. And in my estimation, it's a crime. It's not a matter of willpower, but more so it's a matter of corruption and deceit within the industry, namely within the sugar industry. Back to the McGovern report. I said earlier in the presentation that if a date could be assigned to the start of the obesity epidemic, it would be 1977, the McGovern report, where they said to take the fat out of the foods. Well, what happens when you take fat out of a food? It doesn't taste very good. I don't know this from experience, but it does not taste very good. If you take the fat, the dietary fat out of a food, it's going to taste like cardboard. So in order to keep it palatable and maintain taste, sugar was dumped into the food products. Take the fat out, dump sugar in, maintains taste, but we have now the greatest public health crisis of our time. Obesity, metabolic disease today costs over $210 billion with a B dollars every single year, and it's actually expected to more than double to $500 billion by the year 2030. It has been named the #1 risk to national security. You will not have troops. You will not have competent police officers. You will not have competent firemen. You will not have healthy role models in the medical field for doctors and nurses. It is not an epidemic. It is a pandemic. Epidemic implies within one's own borders, whereas this clearly is not the case. Obesity and metabolic disease has spread worldwide. The United States, this is not a bragging moment either. The United States is no longer the fattest country in the world, the most unhealthy nation on the planet. We have been surpassed by a number of countries. And the reason why is because we have taken our culture, we have taken our westernized way of life to those countries, and we have infected their populations and their citizens and their children. It has become television entertainment, and this is something that I am not innocent from. I mean, The Biggest Loser, the extreme weight loss, these television shows that actually that we get a kick out of it. We find it entertaining. And even more puzzling is those who even suffer from these symptoms, those who are overweight, those who are obese, those who do not have slim waistlines, they too find it entertaining. It's troubling. And it's the first time in the history of the world where more people are actually dying from obesity than they are from starvation. And I'm telling you that all of this comes down to one thing, which is sugar. And when you look at this label again, everyone looking at their screens now, what is the one thing on that label that does not offer a percentage daily value? It's the only thing that doesn't add a percentage value, sugar. It's interesting, and it is by absolutely no means a coincidence. Because that number right there, 18 grams of sugar, that number would be 96%. It would say 96% in whatever food product this is. Okay, that's 18 grams. Let's contrast that with a soft drink that has 77 grams. Imagine what that percentage value would be. It is the most evil thing on the planet that we have marketing and advertising to children. Children who do not have the intellectual capacity to defend themselves, that we are using public airwaves to advertise habits that are hazardous to health. We see false advertising all the time. A prime example being soft drinks. How is it possible? Think as an intellectual now. How is it possible to have a soda that has 0 calories and 0 grams of sugar? Unfortunately, not to be rude, but if you do believe that a soda that you can buy and drink that tastes as sweet and as just syrupy and as it is, if you truly believe that can have 0 grams of sugar in it and 0 calories, then you are kidding yourself. The laws, the labeling laws in this country are simply atrocious. And it is such that many of artificial sweeteners do not need to be listed on food labels nor included and counted as calories. That is how you get things like the 0-calorie drinks and the 0-sugar diet soft drink variations. Again, just to make sure you heard it, the laws in this country are such that artificial sweeteners do not need to be included on food labels, even though it's the same exact thing. And people choose these food options truly believing in their hearts, or at least wanting to believe that they're actually making a healthier choice. We have the youngest addicts on the planet in the form of children's formula. If you do not breastfeed your children 100% of the time, and you result in any sort of formula, you are giving your child a soda. You're giving them a soft drink, period. And maybe not necessarily a soda, because soda implies carbonation, but you are giving them a soft drink. You are giving them something that is just filled with added sugar. And there are numerous studies that actually show that sugar is 8 times more addictive than cocaine, due in part because it is the energy source that the brain uses. So the brain actually grabs onto sugars more tightly than it does even a drug like cocaine. Giving your children formula nowadays, you are breeding the youngest addicts on the planet. And those will be habits that will be very difficult to break, lifelong. The industry is self-governing. There are many big-time executives, business executives, that actually hold political seats in the House and in the Senate. There are many senators, House members, and congressmen, and judges, and things of that sort, who also have positions in big food companies. They get bought out all the time. There are 600,000 food items that exist in the world. 80% of them have added sugar that would not be there otherwise. School lunches are absolutely atrocious. Children go to school over 180 days per year. They eat minimum 1 meal at school a day, sometimes 2 if they serve breakfast. Clearly, school lunches are very important to the health and nutrition of a child. Pizza, however, is considered a vegetable in more states than it's not, which is the most embarrassing thing in the world because tomatoes are not even a vegetable. Tomatoes are a fruit. It it is something that, you know, I bang my head on the table. Pizza is considered a vegetable, and tomatoes are a fruit. The industry funds research. Soda was found in a very, very big study, a highly anticipated study. Soda was found to not be linked to obesity whatsoever. That entire research was funded by Coca-Cola. You can look these things up. The World Health Organization, an organization within the United Nations responsible for coming up with health guidelines for all of the countries that are a part of the United Nations. They issued a statement years ago saying that only 10% of calories, only 10% should come from sugar. And what did our wonderful country do? We refused to pay our contribution to the United Nations unless that was changed. And of course it got changed. And Let's Move campaign. What comes to mind when you think of Let's Move campaign? Exercise, right? Well, if you actually go back and you watch Michelle Obama's opening statement announcing her campaign, Let's Move, the word exercise actually never came up in the entire presentation. She was calling for action by the food industry. She was saying, let's move Kellogg's, let's move Coca-Cola, let's move Pepsi, let's move Monsanto, let's make positive change and pivot the products that we have to make them more health conscious. The result clearly being, I'm sure, a large paycheck involved and a new marketing scheme to make the Let's Move campaign about exercise. So that's tragic. That is tragic. It's a systematic political failure. And ultimately, sugar has so many different names. Water is H2O. We all know this. This is the chemical formula for water. Sugar is C6H12O6. Unfortunately, so are all of these. And these. And these. And unfortunately, so many more. They all have different names because they all have a different structure three-dimensionally. But from the neck down and to the body, it is still C6H12O6. So when you look at food labels, unfortunately, you have to look for all of these different names and more. I couldn't even fit them all on the slide. Clearly, the labeling laws in this nation are atrocious because you shouldn't, as a consumer, have to have the burden of carrying a list of all these different names of sugars and things to avoid. And the myth of high fructose corn syrup, it is not worse for you than any other type of sugar. It is a marketing ploy used by the industry to label high fructose corn syrup as a culprit and therefore say, our product is healthier because we don't have high fructose corn syrup. Meanwhile, I am telling you that every single one of these, every single one of them, is the same exact thing. High fructose corn syrup is C6H12O6. So is brown sugar, so is nectar, so is honey and agave. They are all the same. Which brings me to this concept called TOFI. And this is very important for everyone here to understand. TOFI is an acronym that represents the majority of our population, as you see, 60%. It stands for thin on the outside, fat on the inside. I'll say that one more time. Thin on the outside, but fat on the inside. Meaning you slide them under a scanner and they might as well be obese because they have the fatty liver They have the heart disease. They have the HDL and LDL fluctuations. They have diabetes, whatever. Believe it or not only does TOFI represent the majority of the population, which is a disgrace, quite frankly, of the $210 billion that are spent every single year on healthcare and medical expenses combating metabolic disease and obesity, the majority of that $210 billion are spent on TOFI, not on the obese population, spent on TOFI. People want to demonize the obese population, saying that it's their fault, when in reality, the majority of the financial burden that our country is put under is actually by people of seemingly good health, people who are of seemingly healthy weight, but in reality are TOFI, are thin on the outside and they are fat on the inside. It is truly a public health crisis, and you know that it's a huge issue when we as a society would rather subject our children to liposuction procedures as opposed to just properly funding school cafeterias. The reality is, to quote Mark Pittman of the New York Times, is that sugar is the cigarette of the 21st century. The sugar industry is behaving much like the tobacco industry of old, and sugar is truly the cigarette, the addictive item of the 21st century. Sugar is a chronic, dose-dependent hepatotoxin. Chronic meaning that has long-term effects. Dose-dependent meaning that it truly does matter. It depends on how much of it you take, because sugar is, again, required by the body. But again, we want the body's usage of sugars to come from the digested starches, not direct consumption of sugars themselves. Hepato, meaning liver, and toxin, of course, meaning it's poisonous. And just like how cigarettes literally cause cancer, people don't say that cigarettes increase your risk of cancer. No. Cigarettes literally cause cancer. Sugar literally causes metabolic disease. These are facts. And there are so many solutions out there, right? You see all of the different diets, the different gym franchisees, and the different memberships, the surgeries, but none of them take a holistic approach. Going back to the very beginning of this presentation, holistic meaning not just the physical, not just the nutritional, not just the psychological, but all three. None of which are proven to work, and none of which address the real root of the problem, which are the industry and education or lack thereof. The issue is not with the consumer. The issue is not with the general public. The true issue, is with the industry and a lack of edification, an edification that I'm hoping I'm providing today. So the true solution is to break this vicious cycle that we see here, where obesity leads to these physical implications, where for example, children, they have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, obesity, whatever it is. That leads a child to social turmoil, where they're bullied, they're inactive, they lack social skills, whatever it may be, to emotional implications where you're depressed now, you're aloof, you're angry, you're not focusing in school as a result, you have feelings of inadequacy. External implications, meaning that my father died. My father died from obesity and metabolic disease. So it does affect people outside of the actual individual who has the symptoms. Just like how cancer affects other people, so does obesity and metabolic disease. There are external implications that transcend just that one individual. But there are coping mechanisms that people turn to, like food, like video games, whatever it may be, that unfortunately lead back to the obesity, and you have this vicious cycle. You have parents who want to help, but they usually have unhealthy constellations which lead to compounding the issue. It is my goal for my life, it is the goal of my business to break these vicious cycles, to give entire families the tools that they need to lead healthy lifestyles. And not to spend too much time on this. The F3 approach has worked for many. The program that we promote takes into consideration jump-starting the metabolism in 4 to 10 minutes. It makes nutrition fun. It makes nutrition realistic. It prioritizes the psychological journey that we as adults must go on and that we must educate our children to be aware of as they grow. And ultimately, I believe that if we make health a family commitment, then we can actually improve the health and the health and wellness of our nation in this world. Ultimately, what's the secret, guys? You guessed it. You need to limit your sugar intakes. Take the World Health Organization recommendation to heart. Only 10% of your total calories should come from sugar. Holistically speaking, it should be less than 24 grams a day for men and less than 20 grams a day for women. You need to get consistent and regular sleep. Sleep is the body's time to recover. This is the main aspect of the psychological component to health. You need to have consistent and regular sleep. And you need to exercise like you brush your teeth. It needs to be every day. These three things, the triad, they transcend one another. And if all three are done every single day of your life, you will be healthy and you will be happy. So summing it up, to reverse the pandemic trends of obesity, childhood obesity, and diet-related diseases, my life will be dedicated to doing so through my code of family education and fitness. And my website, which I should have put in the PowerPoint, is familyfirstfitness.com. And for those who have absolutely any questions of any sort, do not hesitate at all to reach out to me. I am here truly for you. So thank you all so much for your time, and I hope you've taken something away from this. And Jen, I'm going to flip it back over to you. As Jen is now typing to me. She said, thanks everyone, we will continue going until Guy is done. I'm long-winded. And will be recorded for you to view later. Thanks for joining us, and don't miss next month's webinar. Cool. All right, everyone, you may unmute your phones, ask any questions that you have.
Hi, Guy. I'm sorry about that. I went to start talking and it hung up on me. Thank you, everyone, for participating. This was some great information. Thanks to Guy for sharing it with us. And I will get the webinar posted as soon as we have it synced, and you'll be able to view again in case you missed something or happen to join us late. And I will send out a follow-up email as well to all of you that have joined us. So thanks again, Guy. It was some great information, and we look forward to seeing all that you do with F3 in the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.